welcome over here. Stefan will introduce himself, but he comes all the way from South Africa. He's online here. I was pointed out to Stefan by our professor who was at the VU Education Day like the year before, Lambert Schubert. And well, he said very nice stories about you, Stefan, about your experiments with the personal tutor bots. And so I said, well, I tried to invite you on the VU EdTech Day, and you said, well, I'm happy to be here. So there's 2 sessions for you today. The first one is with the personal tutor bots, and the other is with the feedback system. Maybe they're a little bit mixed up in between one another, but I don't think that's a big problem. So please take it away, and then we'll happy to hear to you. Okay, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Sylvester. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, Lambert's been very kind with his words and has been very kind to us over the years. And we have definitely pulled him in. You'll see in this presentation, we'll be speaking about how we've used these bots in our accounting course, because I'm actually an accounting lecturer here in the University of Pretoria, South Africa. And Lambert, as you all know, is in the health professions education. And what we did is we initially developed this bot for ourselves in accounting, and then we thought, but the health professions is not that far removed and can perhaps also use these things. So we reached out to Lambert and he tested it and contributed to the prompting on the health professions bot that I'll also make you aware of today. But they both work very similarly. So if I show something on the screen from the accounting or the health professions one, it'll look the same on the other one. So they're very much sister bots. I'm going to try and now move on to my next slide and see that that's all working. There we go. So there's the links for the 2 bots. The father, if you like, of them is the accounting education bot. You'll see there's 2 links there. I just know at our university on the firewall, for some reason, the first link doesn't always work successfully, but it takes the link with the .co.za, and then the HPE bot is the health professions bot that we worked with Lambert on. So you're welcome to explore these now or later on and see what you think of them and if they give you any inspiration for developing your own or for uses with your students. Sorry, there we go. So I think I wanted to start off with, and it sort of feeds into the session that we've just been with, is just reflecting on what your initial reaction to all this was. And we've been shown now in the first session that the generative AI is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it is getting better. And I think it's getting better exponentially fast. For example, the example given earlier on, if the word ginger contained an A, I quickly ran it myself on ChatGPT 4 Turbo, and it got it perfectly right. There was no issues with it, and even went as far as spelling ginger out correctly for me and emphasizing each letter in it. So I think the technology is advancing exponentially fast. So what I share with you today might be old by tomorrow already, unfortunately, and it's a challenge to keep up with it. But I know here in South Africa, many of our responses and colleagues that I've spoken to overseas as well, there was a bit of panic initially when the generative AI model started becoming commercial with ChatGPT, and that's about 1.25 years ago now. And I think most of the academics responded in this way, thinking that this is just going to help the students cheat, it's going to enable them to cheat. And if I'm not worried about the student, I'm going to be replaced. That was also mentioned in the keynote earlier on. And then my whole profession, in my case, the accounting profession, is finished. And I think given the focus on the HPE bots as well, there's a lot of AI moving into the health professions as well. So I think that was everybody's initial reactions. I think those have slowly started calming down. I know there was a website where you could go onto to see if your career, what the chance of you being replaced was. And accountants was right up there at 99% or something. So I think that's changed. I think we've got over that. And I think we're starting to embrace the AI a little bit more. So if I can just go back to that first slide to explain why I've used the picture of Iron Man, is I think we need to start viewing AI as this tool that we can embrace and can make us better. And it's not something that we really should be fearing. It's not something replacing us. It's perhaps something we can use to enhance what we're doing. So this is a typical picture I think many of us initially had of our students with ChatGPT. And this picture made a lot of us uncomfortable because our involvement, first of all, we thought we were going to be replaced. But the one thing that bugged me is I couldn't see what my students were doing with ChatGPT. So I wasn't sure what they were asking it. And I also was scared of what it was answering. And especially with those early iterations, which made more mistakes, I think, than it's making at the moment, was it feeding my students incorrect information? And there wasn't any way for us to really remedy that because I was blind to these interactions. And it was sort of at that point that my colleagues and I sat down and we thought, we need to find a way to insert ourselves between the AI. So we don't want to go the route of banning the AI. I know that's a knee-jerk reaction everywhere, similar to when calculators arrived many years ago. But we wanted to embrace it, and we viewed it as a tool, especially in our large classes here in South Africa. We're sitting with, I think, 440 students at the moment. So we wanted to see how AI could assist us, but we didn't want to be excluded from the process. So that was almost our biggest fear in the end, that we wanted to insert ourselves there between the students and the AI, that we could have an influence and some control over what was happening. Now, jumping ahead a little bit, and I'll rewind to how we developed it and things just now, but just to show you some of the things that we started picking up once we'd implemented our own AI bot, was our students were really terrible at prompting it. And I've realized in time and chatting to Lambert as well, that students are even quite bad at asking Google questions. And despite us all being older than this current digital generation, I think many of us can out-Google our students because we've got an existing knowledge level. We can write the question in Google better and fine-tune it to get more relevant results to what we're looking for. And the same is true, if not more so, with the AI models. So we, for example, with our students would see that there's a accounting policy in our discipline. So it's sort of, how do you account for something? For example, land, would you account it as cost in your financial statements, or would you value it at a market value? So that would be an accounting policy choice, and you can change between them. And a lot of our students get confused by this, but they were prompting the bots with something like change in accounting policy. So very similar, I suppose, to what they're using with Google, but it really doesn't help the AI to help them very much. So we learned from this that our students need to prompt better, and we're going to have to help them with that. So despite developing this bot for them, we need to help them in various ways. One is developing the bot for them, and the other way is to teach them to prompt better. But now, when we sat back and we were thinking about this, I want to help my students prompt better for their profession, which isn't teaching. I want to prompt them better to be a better accountant. So when they're sitting in practice one day and they have issues and they're consulting the AI, that they prompt it optimally for the accounting side. We, on the other hand, have more exposure to education and learning theories and all those things. So we can hopefully write better prompts as teachers. I might want to teach my students a little bit about that for independent learning, self-directed learning, and going into continuing professional education later on. But my main focus of prompting will be them as accountants. Now, with that short, inadequate prompt, this is a response that, I think this was the GPT-4 model that I took the screenshot of about 5 months ago. And it gave a thorough answer to the student. And I think that was also part of the problem. It was too thorough. It wasn't sure what to give the students, so it gave them a dump of information. So, for example, in accounting, the Americans and the rest of the world have different accounting standards. So it touched on both of those and never went into really any detail in this. So what we managed to do is, with developing our bots and including additional prompts in the back. So when we chatted to now ChatGPT through this bot will say their change in accounting policy. But before it goes through to the OpenAI, it will add additional things to it, like this student is from South Africa, this student is a second-year student. And then we'd include teaching things in it as well to keep it in plain English, include examples. And all those things then help the GPT model to give a better response to the student. So in the response on the screen there, you'll see it's given a specific example of inventory because it knows that the student is a second-year student, for example, in this case. And it was able to give that example knowing it's at a lower level of the accounting policies. It was able to see the student was in South Africa, which we use the international financial reporting standards, unlike the Americans. And because it had that context, it was even able to go into the particular accounting standard. So this answers that despite the very simplistic prompt, much better quality to what the student needs to be given. So that's sort of why we then went further into the development of this when we started seeing benefits like this for our students. And I think this quote, Astrid did it in her PhD, sure, about 6-7 years ago. I'll chat a little bit about that history as well now, but I think it's quite a profound quote in that instructors rather than programmers should take ownership for developing bots for teaching and learning. The ability to communicate content to encourage social constructivist learning is a skill that instructors specialize in. And upon reflection on this over time, I think it is easier now for instructors to learn how to create AI tools than it is to get programmers to learn about the nuances of teaching and learning. So I really think there needs to be more of a shift and less reliance on developers and more reliance on ourselves to become the developers of these tools to enhance and support our teaching. So we took our first steps into this space with bots in about 2018, if I remember correctly. And you may remember those messenger bots on Facebook. They were very simplistic, but I know you could, for example, book an airline ticket and things through Facebook's Messenger in those years. So we took some steps, and I've given the reference there, how we developed those and how we were thinking about it, because a lot of those lessons now informed when we went forward to develop the personal bots that you're seeing with us today. At that time, though, using the word AI, I think, was very overly simplistic. The AI bots in that stage with the messenger bots really worked on a pre-programmed sort of database spreadsheet. And if the student asked something, it would just search in that limited for something that looked similar. And it was very rudimentary. It wasn't anything near like these large language, the large predictive models they spoke about in the keynote. But it gave us practice and just sort of thinking about how we could possibly use this and bring in the education and learning theories into it. So all these things that I've discussed with you now, wanting to be able to prompt better, to get our students better answers, wanting to be able to insert ourselves in the process, what we'd learned with those messenger bots many years ago, all culminated now in this tutor for the accounting students and the HPE bot for the health professions students. So I said to you that quote of Astrid's now that instructors need to be taking more ownership. I don't have any programming knowledge. I've maybe picked up a little bit now over the last few months, a few years, but really not enough to even call myself a programmer or coder at all. But there's so many tools available now that they call your no-code tools, and I've given you a screenshot there of what it looks like. And it's very much a drag and drop interface. So if you wanted to have some text appear on the screen to the student, you could just drag from the menu on the side. You'll see visual elements if it's big enough there in the venue. You could drag a text box like you would in PowerPoint onto the screen, and that would show text to the student. So this does take some learning, and there are many YouTube videos to assist you in getting familiar with the no-code platforms. The one you're seeing at the moment is called bubble.io. And I found it to be one of the most user-friendly to support the development of things like this. So it's really, if you spend a bit of time learning that, you won't be a coder or a programmer, but between Bubble and asking ChatGPT to help you design it in Bubble, you can go very far with creating a very simplistic bot for your own students. And then you taking really the control of where they're consulting and the kind of responses they're going to be getting. Where a little bit of programming does come in, and you may look at that and get a bit fearful, and that's not the intention at all. I actually want to allay the fears. And if you look at it slowly, the template of this actually comes from OpenAI. So what we do is we create the wrapper for this AI bot. We create the web app the student sees, and then we don't develop the AI. We then piggyback on what OpenAI is doing with ChatGPT. So they use what they call the GPT 3.5 model, the GPT-4 or GPT-4 Turbo model in the background. So that model then is in our background. So our student doesn't interface with it though. It interfaces now with our app that we've developed in Bubble. And then it goes and then it interfaces, the app interfaces then with the GPT model in the background. And it does that with this prompt. So it's a very simple prompt. The one we've got to now has already grown a lot, and we've learned a lot in prompting and writing prompts, which I'll discuss in the next session on feedback. I'll actually go into a very detailed prompt with you there. But the model that you're seeing here, the template of this, OpenAI makes available, and then you actually just have to go and insert your own prompts into it. So that's about the sum total, if you like, and this isn't really even coding of its own, but that is just in the background then connecting the web application through to OpenAI that it's able to respond to our students. And you'll see on the screen there, all those things that are in green is information that will be from our database and bubble, which is like an Excel spreadsheet, will be the student's name. So it can personalize the responses to the student. What is the student learning about? So it will know if it's IFRS or American GAAP, or if it's a physician that's studying, or anesthetist studying, or gynecologist that's studying, in the case of the HPE bot. It will give it the history, the old messages that the student has done for better context, etc. So it'll feed this then through. But if that feels overwhelming and you are in the accounting and the health profession sciences, you're welcome to piggyback on ours. We started this bot initially just for our students. The intention was never to go beyond that. And then we noticed in July last year that there was quite a significant uptake suddenly of students outside of a university. And I noticed it the hard way with the cost of interacting with ChatGPT. It is cheaper with the AI, with the API than going through the ChatGPT where you pay $20 to use it. So you do pay for the use of it, but it is a lot cheaper. But then in July, I noticed that my costs had suddenly ballooned exponentially and I couldn't self-fund this anymore. So we had to come up with some plans that you'll see on the website. We do have a premium edition, if you like now, and then the free edition to try and keep it accessible to all. So that happened in July, and then because of the uptake and we saw students starting to use it, we started adding additional features now. So it's grown a lot from being a simple, you type your question and get your answer, which was the initial idea behind it. So to show you some of the features we've now built into it, on the screen you can see there is a question and there's a response from ChatGPT in effect in the background. We've added the ability, just like with ChatGPT, to have multiple chats on it. Then if you look at the bottom of the screen there now, you'll see, and this is where Lambert added a lot of value as well to us. The student can click on a little icon there that looks like a YouTube icon, which I'll show you the effects of just now. There's a diver for a deep dive. I'm giving you hints as to what's coming. Then there's a little question mark for questions. There's also a suggested follow-up question that's generated at the bottom of the screen for the students. Because often your students will ask, in our earlier example, change an accounting policy, and then they don't really know what to ask next. So we've created a separate prompt where we get the AI to assist in giving us what would be the next most appropriate question for the student to perhaps ask, just to help them down that learning path. So that's in the red box there. And then on the side is just all the settings. There'll be a teacher dashboard that I'll chat to you about now. And then there's an option for them to interact with authentic learning with current news and to upload documents and things that they can interact with as well. But everything you're seeing in the red block there, that's really developed once we saw the demand and the uptake for this, and that it was valuing students. Initially, and this is, I think, where everybody can perhaps start, it's just a little interface between yourself and OpenAI. Your students can ask a question and get the response to that question. And in the background, if you use something like Bubble, you'll be able to then see that interaction. So you're not going to be out of the loop anymore. And that we've also built in now, and I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll show it to you all just now. So as this is developed, the student can upload an image and of handwritten text, for example. Then the model in the background now will extract that text, and the student will then be able to ask questions about that image. This has been particularly useful for the next session where we're talking about how to give feedback using AI models. The student also has the option here to upload something, and we've used this with our handouts in our particular course. So you can upload a handout for the students, or the student can do it themselves in this case. And it could have the questions and solutions that the students are working with. And then the students can ask questions as they would of a tutor, because the model now doesn't just have ChatGPT's database available to it, it's also what you've got uploaded as well. And that's also very useful sometimes when there's different interpretations of how you teach things in the world. If you want your interpretation or your way of explaining something for the students, let the students upload that handout to this, and then that will serve as the primary resource for the bot to be responding to them. And that just solves some confusion issues as well. So on this slide, then you'll see there, if you press the YouTube button, what we've done there as well now is in the background, again, is a prompt that links through to YouTube. And what we've actually asked it is, the prompt basically says, given this message and this conversation, design an optimal search term for YouTube to find videos that will help the student understand the conversation so far. That's basically what the student can't see. So the student's having a discussion, presses the button, and then we building that prompt for them in the background, and it will return then videos from YouTube that are most appropriate or the best that we can come up with at this point based on technology to the discussion above, just to help them with additional explanations. Then that question mark as well, if they click on that, what we've done in the background is we've written a prompt again. Like you could go to ChatGPT and you could say, give me a multiple choice question to test my knowledge. And that's how students would typically do it. But we all know there's optimal ways to develop a multiple choice question. So what we've tried to do in the background, the student will click that little question mark. We'll create a prompt with what they've been discussing. We'll feed into that prompt the optimal design issues, like how many options, the distractors, characteristics, etc. That will send through in the background. The student doesn't need to do it, and it will return, like you're seeing on your screen now, a multiple choice question for the student to test themselves on whatever they've been discussing with the bot. So the whole time we're trying to automate the prompting that the students don't need to do the educational prompting in the background. Then that little icon at the bottom, what we're trying to do there is a little bit of authentic learning. So if you click on that, and again, I'm just trying to give you all ideas of ways that we can use this in our teaching and learning. So what that icon does is it goes through the latest news, finance news in the case of the accounting bot, and it looks for recent financial news that's interesting and of application to the students and their profile that they've set up when they created their account. And then it asks them questions about that news item and gives them links through to the news item. And it just helps the student to really engage in testing and applying their existing knowledge and learning to a real world authentic news as it's breaking at the moment in the world. So I mentioned earlier on, the students can upload their own, and this is now for teachers. When we realized teachers at other universities were starting to use this, we created this now so you can see the progression over time. So with this, you can click on that icon, you can go and then create what we call a class. And the intention here is that you can upload your study note for the student, your questions, your solutions, or a chapter. If you've written notes in the form of a chapter or something, you can upload it here, and then your student will be able to engage with that document and ask questions about it if they don't understand. Our primary motivation initially for this is having 440 students. It's very hard to give personal responses. We have an email address where they can ask questions, but particularly before assessments, it's very difficult to get to 440 emails. There's only 3 staff on the course, so even if you divide it by 3, it's still over 100 students you're trying to service. And the hope was that the AI can assist us. So the students can go in here, the handouts, that they enter a code when they use it, they gain access to that handout, and they can then engage with asking the AI questions about that handout. So you'll see then for the teachers as well, when your students join your class in this, they listed there on the left-hand side of the screen, and you can actually go and see the questions they're asking about your handout, which is really helpful in creating a diagnostic tool for you that you can go back to class and you can say, you know, most of you are battling with this. Or you can see perhaps the AI is responding inappropriately. And then you can say, right, the AI did respond as this. Great opportunity to learn about critical thinking. You can't take it at face value. We need to think about it a bit further and then discuss it and use it as a trigger in your classroom. Then as the students use this more and more, the manual process I just described now, we thought, sure, this is even getting a bit much now to go through all those students. So what we then built into it was again a prompt for ourselves to create a report summarizing the students' engagements with that particular document. So it would give us things that came up a lot of times, what was the main challenges, actionable recommendations that we can perhaps use in class to correct those challenges. And you can even then hold a discussion with the AI now, who's acting as sort of an informant for you, for your teaching. And together you and the AI can perhaps work out the students' weaknesses and the best ways to respond to that with a bit of nudging from the AI. So yeah, that's a very quick summary. I hope I haven't overwhelmed you too much with what's happening in the application. And I think the idea there is really just to give you ideas. If you can go and empower yourself with these no-code tools, and I'd be happy to, if anybody wants to email me and help where I can, you can in time build that no-code tool for yourself and start making it an ally in your teaching and learning rather than this unseen enemy potentially. So how it's grown with us is we started with our course at that stage last year at 490 students, and then July it's taken off, and we're sitting just short of 3,000 students now on this bot that's using it. And I checked this the other day, we have about 83,000 messages that have been sent to it so far. So the students are embracing it and tend to be using it more and more. And that's nice for us in that we've created that accessibility for them. So we've then taken this now in a different direction as well, having so many students, in that we've tried to now give feedback to our students on the essay questions, which again, you can imagine giving personalized feedback to 440 students is quite a time-robbing task and a very onerous task and soul-destroying task. So again, we sat back and we thought, okay, how can we embrace AI to assist us in doing that? And almost make the students more independent in their learning. And that I'm going to be discussing with you in the next session at 11:30, if you want to log back in for that. And I'll discuss about how and I'll go into a lot of detail there on the prompt engineering and how we develop the prompts. So if you want some information on prompt engineering, even if you're not interested in the feedback, that will be coming up in the session later on as well. So I think that the motto of the story with all of this is I've hopefully just shown you some ways that we're starting to embrace it with our large classes of students, to give you some inspiration, to give you some ideas, hopefully to kick off some enthusiasm to the possibilities. The technology is getting better every day. Just the other day, GPT-4 Turbo was launched, and it's really doing a better job than any of the previous GPTs. But to embrace this together as teachers and to go forward together in South Africa, our rugby team's hashtag is stronger together. And I think that's very true for teachers as well. If we can work together to embracing this new technology, we can only make our learning environments better for our students. And if you want to reach out to me, there's my contact details at the bottom of the screen, my email address, stephen.coetzee@up.ac.za. And then I am also on X, on Twitter, the old Twitter, Elon Musk now with the X, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well. And I'd be happy to touch base with anybody. So
Okay.
that has gone a bit quicker than I expected, Sylvester.
Yes, you're very quick.
Plenty of time for questions, and I can go
Yes.
back to any slides and we can go through it slower if there's anything that the audience requires.
I think that would be great indeed. So thank you for so far. I'll give a hand of applause for Stefan already. So it was very knowledge intensive that you just explained to us, Stefan. But still, I'm very much intrigued, and I hope that people in the audience are also intrigued. So let's try and go ahead with some questions that people would like to ask you. Is that okay for you?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so who has a question for Stefan at the moment about what he's done, about the system? Yes, over there. And I'll repeat the question. Is that okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So the question is, Harvard ran a study and said, well, how much percentage, if that's the correct thing, is the response of the chatbot actually correct? And they said, well, it's about 88%, and maybe it will improve. But how do you deal with the incorrectness in your system? Is that a big problem? How do you deal with that? Do you see it as a learning opportunity? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, that triggers many thoughts, and I must try and now not forget some of those thoughts. So it is definitely, as you mentioned, a learning opportunity, because you need to teach your students to engage critically with the technology, as was the case, as they mentioned in the keynote many years ago with Wikipedia. You need to not just accept things at face value. And that's something that we need to be teaching our students, that skill to look at things with a critical mind, to be asking questions, does this sound reasonable? Doesn't it sound reasonable? So that's quite important. I wasn't aware of the study and the 88% in particular, but I do know from my own experience that the responses are getting better and better. But what we've also then done for this is if teachers are using this and your student goes into a class where you've uploaded notes for them, what we've then built into the model on the screen, there'll be a little icon under the response from the AI that the student can actually, from that message, tap on that, it generates an email, and the student can then type there an email to the instructor that created that class, and can say, this in this message, it said this, but you said this in class, for example. So it's enabling that seamless interaction between the student reads a response that might not align with what's in class, or they don't agree with what's there. They can click on a button, it creates an email and sends it through to the instructor for them, which then can be resolved. So we've tried to fine-tune this down from where we're getting 440 emails from our students. We're trying to get students that are appraising the responses critically, then where they're having issues, clicking on that and sending an email through if the AI hasn't helped them appropriately. And then you also get a little bit of an idea of it, and it's not perfect, but with their teaching reports, you can get an idea of what they've asked, what's been answered, and you can maybe start seeing, but something's off there as well. So it's something to be aware of for anybody using AI at this stage. It's not perfect, but we're trying to create little nets to assist the students with. And that is in itself the great learning opportunity, that you can't take this just as fact. You need to critically interrogate every response you get from the AI models.
Okay, thank you. Does it answer your question for a bit? Yeah. Helene, what is your question? Okay, so that's two questions, if I remember correctly. So the first is about what do students think of the system? Are they engaged with it? And the second one is a little bit related, but do students really like it? Do they work with it? Do you have like a gain in results maybe of your course, or maybe a gain in results of the appreciation of your courses? Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yes. Well, the first uptake initially, we had our own students using it exclusively, and that was fairly easy to monitor. And they were definitely using it. But I'd also say it's almost a case of, we've got the saying, different strokes for different folks. So some students engaged with it more than others. Others weren't interested at all. So we're generally viewing this now from our point of view, where we use it in our courses. It's just one more tool that's there for the students. They don't have to use it. But those of them that feel comfortable with using it, they are welcome to. Others that don't, the traditional support structures are all still there for them. So it's just becoming one more arrow in their quiver to learning. So we are busy with research papers, and we're looking at the engagements, and you can see from the number of messages and things that I gave to you earlier on that they are working with it. And then you'll get some students, we've gone in and had a look, that have had hundreds of messages with the bots. And I think what it's doing as well is you often get your shy students. This is anecdotal, of course, but we've noticed a lot of the students that are too shy to ask in class are asking the AI now. And they might even be too scared to ask the professor, or come to the office to ask the professor one-to-one. And they're starting to ask the AI. And even students that we don't know because they don't come to a lot, you can pick up with the emails that start coming through from this when they're engaging with the class notes and things, that it's serving some students more than others. And perhaps it's those shy students that are overwhelmed in a 200 group or a 400 group to be able to enhance their learning. I hope I've answered that.
Yes. Did you answer the question? Yeah, Helene is nodding. Yeah, that's great. Who else has a question? Yeah, on the left-hand side for me. Yeah, well, the question is about privacy and, well, where does the data end up of the students and where does the documents end up? How is this taken care of, Stephen?
Yes, I actually thought I'd added that slide into this presentation, but it probably in the next presentation. The privacy is an issue always with these things. So the one nice thing as well about this, rather than ChatGPT, because ChatGPT, you're feeding the information into the GPT model individually, and there's all sorts of concerns there. I know there is a little setting you can go and change that they won't use your discussion to train the model, etc. But very few people, I think, know about that, and they don't generally switch that on. So what this does is this is not using that commercial ChatGPT interface. Here you're actually engaging with what we call an API, which is a programming interface in the background. And there the privacy rules are very different to what they are in the commercial products. ChatGPT as a rule, well, not ChatGPT, OpenAI as a rule, isn't using the API data for training purposes. So it is more private in that respect. The access to the API, there's an API key, so nobody can intercept the transmissions between yourself and OpenAI. It also uses that secure HTTPS website. Then the data is actually stored locally. So it's stored on Bubble in our instance that we use to develop it. And Bubble's got all sorts of access controls there for your database as well. OpenAI does retain the communications with the students, but only for 30 days and then deletes it. And they don't use it for training purposes. So what we've done with the application now that it's been more widely adopted, we've included all this information in the privacy terms on the application. And then in terms of when we create classes for our students, we've made it very clear to our students that if you upload this document and you create a class conversation, your teacher will be able to see that class conversation for teaching purposes and diagnostic purposes, that they're also just aware of that additional pair of eyes on their conversations. I hope
Does
that
that answer your question a bit? My question was related to that a little bit, and there's also a question in the chat that I will put forward, but of course, I suppose you have like a processor agreement with Bubble US because they do process all your data. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Bubble, well, it's up to you. The easiest is to use Bubble. You can also plug in something like Amazon Web Services or one of these other cloud storage platforms. In our case, we've just kept it simple because it meets our purposes at this stage. But I think for applications that get really big, then you might want to use Amazon Web Services and things like that. So then they are stored on third-party servers in the cloud. But all these big companies have their data controls around that.
Okay, that's great. And in the chat, there was a question about how do you deal with the private data from students? Do you instruct students to input personal data into their prompts or questions asked to the bot? How do you deal with that?
Sorry, I'm not sure I follow the question. So personal data that the students would put through?
That's what the prompt says from Ana Lucia.
Yes. Okay. So for example, the student's name or something like that goes through. When the students are creating their account with us, they can use an anonymous name if they want to. They can use a fictitious name if they want to. They don't need to upload a little avatar of their face. They can use the standard. We've got a little, I'm a Star Wars fan, so it's a little generic avatar of a stormtrooper. So we try to give them the option to share the extent of the information that they want to share it with. So I've noticed that a lot of students don't upload a photo of themselves. They will, however, upload a little picture of a flower or some other generic animal. There hasn't surprisingly not been a lot of reluctance to give a name, although I have noticed some students that do use, they'll, for example, take the Star Wars lead and call themselves Stormtrooper 1980. And I actually mentioned that to my kids the other day that are also in this younger generation. And they said a lot of people these days from the gaming platforms are so used to putting in these almost anonymous gaming names that they use that on the platform as well. So it's all things that serve as great educational lessons for our students in terms of what data do you put into apps in general, and when do you feel comfortable to put those things in.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions from the audience? Any other questions for Stefan? No, I don't see other questions. Yes, Thilo, of course, Thilo has a question.
The observation started the observation about using chatbots with cheating and more cheating. What I was using in, well, with no AI, but still with some communication tools, that students were reviewing their other, well, their writings, and that opened yet another way of cheating by handing in something a student liked from another student. So are you building a big cheating platform, so to speak, and how are you dealing with that?
I don't think we're building the big cheating platform. I think AI is an enabling platform for bad and good as anything with technology. So I think what we're starting to do with as a teacher now, if I step back in a way and I speak about AI generically, we need to be working out for ourselves. I mean, in the generation when calculators came out, there was this panic in the maths education that students are going to cheat with their calculators and things like that, which have subsequently subsided over time. And I think we'll go in a similar direction with this. So what we've actually done as well is it challenges instructors to reconsider their assessment design, that you are asking things that stretch the bounds of what the response could be from ChatGPT. What we've often done as well is we'll take our assessments ourselves, put it into ChatGPT to see what it's capable of doing with that assessment, and then perhaps adjusting. What we've also done is we've actually, in one of our assessments, we've put our question into ChatGPT, we got the response from ChatGPT, and then we made our tests that this is the question, this is the answer, criticize ChatGPT's answer. Because the ChatGPT answer in that instance, if I remember correctly, was rather shallow, and we expected a greater level of detail from our students. So we then brought it into our assessment environment and took the opportunity to start enabling our students to learn that critical review of it. So rather than waiting for them to go and ChatGPT it, we did it already. And I think that took the wind out of their sails in that particular assessment. But it is a big debate in higher education and education generally at this point. And I don't think it's something we need to fear. It's something we need to consider. How do we include this is now part of our world, it's part of our assessment environment, and how do we improve our assessment practices for this? I mean, I'm in a profession where we have high stakes tests. Then we at this stage are controlling those environments, we're making them sit in venues and vigilation, etc. But when we're doing assessments for learning, we need to be thinking about how we can embrace the artificial intelligence along the way and make it a valuable tool in our assessments.
Okay,
and I think that comes back to, sorry, if I can just add there, Lambert's programmatic assessment. If you're collecting a lot of data points and low stakes and things like that, this will be just one of those data points along the line, or a few, but still within a much bigger set of data for your programmatic assessment.
Okay, thank you for the answer, Stefan. So you're already expanding a little bit on, well, this is just a tool within a set of tools that students can use, so that's what I like. And I must think about the idea that Jan Struiksma, he's a professor of law, and he is in charge of setting the policy for our law department on how to deal with ChatGPT. And he has quite similar ideas to you as regards to like having a tutor bot, but he says, well, the main point is, as a teacher, I will build in this level of inaccuracy. So I can set the accuracy level. And what I do with my students, I say, go to this bot, and then you know already in advance it's not correct. And the trick is that then students should go to find other sources, maybe Wikipedia, for example, or other sources, and then try to learn from the system. Where is it wrong? Actually, the thing that you said, what you do for the final assessment, like give the GPT response and then criticize the response, that's actually what he says. That is what I think the system should do. And our teachers should be able to make these kinds of systems. And then when they come into the classical work group, they are not allowed to use anything anymore. Because then you should have expected them to be trained with giving the critics on the ChatGPT. And then there's this actual formative dialogue with the teacher to really poke into the students' minds. What did you actually learn now? And then they move forward through the course. And I think that's a nice way to use the responses of ChatGPT, knowing that they're already wrong in advance, and maybe setting them even wronger than you expected it to be.
Yeah, that's a very interesting use case. And I think that's the great things of us all getting together and chatting about these things, is to hear about these use cases. And I know my interest was picked as well by another use case in one of the sessions today where people can talk to what do you call it, a person on the screen and learn communication skills. So that's something else that the use cases are incredible. That really can be used for good.
Okay, yeah, great, great. Yeah, that will be a nice session too. So, given that there's no much urgent questions at the moment and that we're like really on time, we have lots of time to drink coffee and to talk with one another about the presentation that we just saw. So another hand of applause for Stefan. Thank you, everyone. And I'm happy everybody can contact you and you're very open to contact. So please go ahead with that. And then we see one another maybe at 11:30. So I'll put you on black, but I'll leave the Zoom on running. And then I hope to talk to anybody of you here in the room during the coffees. Thank you so much. See you later, Stefan.